Hey there, this is Piotr, and in this YouTube series I will help you become Azure Data Engineer. Also, I will prepare you to pass DP203 exam, so let's get started. Now, if I were you, I would ask me a question like this. So, there is a lot of other courses out there, right? So what makes this one so special that I should choose it? And I'm glad you asked. So first of all, I've been in IT for over 18 years, and most of the time I spent on various data engineering related tasks. And trust me, I've seen some wild stuff. Secondly, I hold multiple Azure certifications, so simply put, I just know my stuff. Then I conducted a lot of trainings, a lot of sessions, and I got very positive feedback about them, which makes me believe that I really do know how to conduct them in an interesting way. And I believe that it's much better to learn from someone who is really passionate about the topic than from someone for whom it's just a 9-to-5 job. And finally, this course is completely free. You won't have to pay for anything. There are no hidden costs, no strings attached. And one more thing, I just love teaching. I love sharing the knowledge, and for sure I will have a lot of fun preparing those videos. And hopefully you will have a lot of fun watching them. Alright, so having said that, let's talk about some general assumptions about this course and you as the audience. So you should be able to pass the exam with my help, but please be aware that you need some hands-on experience. You need to practice the stuff that I will be talking about. And if you don't have your own Azure subscription yet, no problem, just use free Azure trial subscription, right? It should be enough for this training. And in the video description, there is a link that will help you create it. And then my goal of this course is not only to help you pass the exam, but rather to help you become Azure data engineers. It means that in some areas, I will go deeper into some topics that it is really necessary from the exam point of view. But I believe that those topics are really important. That's why I'm doing this. Next, I assume that you have some basic knowledge about Azure, that you know its fundamentals. If not, then stop right there and go and watch Adam Marczak's great playlist about fundamentals. And the link is a video description. Then we will cover a lot of Azure services and Azure features during this course, and some of which have quite similar names, like Data Lake, Data Factory, Databricks. And those names, they might start to mix in your heads, right? And my advice to you guys is take notes, really, just take notes. And personally, I use OneNote to manage my notes, but you can use whatever tool works for you, whether it's Excel, Word, OneNote, Mind Map, or even some physical notebook, but please take notes. Next, I will be drawing a lot, sketching various diagrams that will help me explain various topics. And all of these drawings will be available on my GitHub, and link to it you can find in the video description. Then I will do my best to upload new episodes of this series at least twice a month. Maybe even more often, we'll see. Anyway, if you don't want to miss any of those episodes, you know what to do, right? And lastly, I love questions. So if you have any, just post a comment to those videos, and I will try to answer them in future episodes. Alright, so what is data engineering? And I believe that the best way to explain it is to show a real life example. So let's do this. So I have a wife who is a writer. She writes books as a hobby, right? She wrote 4 books so far. She has a publisher who has this website on which my wife can log in and check her sales. And actually it became her everyday ritual to log in every morning to check if there was any new sale. And when I saw this, I realized that, hey, that's a great opportunity for me to automate this process and prove my wife that I really do know something about those computers. And I did it. But there were some challenges down the road that I would like to show you. So first, let's take a look at the website on which my wife can check her sales. So first, obviously, she has to log in, right? Then she has to go to this subsite, and then in the middle, in this table, we can see her sales, right? Easy, right? Not really. So first of all, this publisher, all right, they have this website, right? But there is no API exposed that I could connect to and query to get this data. So instead, I had to find a workaround in which I would just pretend that I'm logging in as my wife, then go to this subsite and finally parse the content of this table. Then, if we take a look at the data in this table, you will notice that actually it is already aggregated, which is a great thing for authors who want to check their sales, but it doesn't really work if you would like to run some analysis on this data. So let me explain what I mean. So for example, this row in the second row means that there was a single copy of particular book, actually this book, sold through Google Play, right? Okay, but it is already aggregated data. So let's say that tomorrow my wife sells yet another 10 copies of this book. Then the next day I would see here 11 as a value, right? 1 plus 10 gives 11. So instead of having those aggregated values, I wanted to have daily sales, right? Which would allow me to slice and dice data later on in reports. Fortunately, if you think about it, it's quite easy to convert those aggregated data into daily sales, right? The only thing you have to do is to take data from today, aggregated values, and subtract values from yesterday. And there you go, you've got sales from a single day. So that was an example of transformations that were required to do on this dataset. Then, if we take a look at some columns, you will notice that they don't contain atomic values. So for example, the first column, it stores two types of information. So the first one, it indicates a sale channel or a shop through which a sale was made. In this case, it was Google Play, right? The other information is a last sale date from given source. So actually what I had to do was to parse this single column into two separate ones to be able to later on filter data by specific data source, right? And something similar we have in the second column. But this time we have three types of information stored. So the first one is a book title, right? The second one is a book format like ebook, audiobook, or a paper one. And finally, in case of ebooks, we've got its format, whether it's EPUB, MOBI, or PDF. So again, this data had to be parsed into separate columns. The last two columns are quite easy. So this one, it tells us how many copies of given book through given sale channel were sold. And the last one tells us how much money my wife got from those sales. And as you can see on the numbers, writing books is not a very lucrative business. Then there was yet another issue with this data set. So basically, this whole table it might get reset from time to time. So this is how it works. So from time to time, my wife generates the invoice to the publisher, and then she gets paid the money, right? All of this stuff. But whenever that happens, all of this data from this table, it disappears, right? And new values start to accumulate from scratch. And for me, it means that I have to be aware of this fact to adjust my calculations. It also means that sometimes your data source is not a system, not a file, not an API, but a human, like in this case. And about data sources, there was yet another data source I had to include in this solution. So my wife had this Excel file that she used to store and track her historical sales. And she asked me to include that in those reports. And as you can guess, the format and the structure of this Excel file was completely different from data on this website. But it's quite a common scenario that we have some historical data stored somewhere that we have to process. And then there is one more data source that I could use. In this case, it's Facebook Marketing API. So basically, my wife created some ads on Facebook to promote her books, right? And Facebook exposes this API through which we can get a lot of insights about those ads, like number of views or number of clicks on those ads. And I could grab this data and correlate it with sales to see if those ads made any difference, right? Now, once I processed all of this data, I was able to detect if anything was sold, right? And if it was, then I sent this nice email to my wife and to me with this clear indication what was sold and how much money she got. And actually this mail was sent automatically by my solution. So no longer my wife had to log in and check it manually. It was done automatically. And finally, I prepared some Power BI reports that helped her to analyze her sales in a visual way. And I know, I admit it, those reports are ugly. I am not a Power BI developer. I don't have front-end skills, but they do the work, right? They work. But anyway, the first question my wife asked when I presented the solution to her was, can I export it to Excel? Yeah. And again, that's a very common scenario that end users would like to have data exportable to Excel. But still, my wife was impressed by this solution. So mission accomplished. Anyway, looking at those numbers and this example that I just provided, you can clearly see that there's a lot of challenges for data engineers, a lot of questions you have to ask yourself. For example, what data sources are there? How to connect to them? How to authenticate? What type of data source is it? Is it API? Is it a file? Is it a database? What data is stored in given data source? What it means actually? Do I get just a subset of data, let's say from a particular date range, or from a whole timeline? Can I define that time range, right? Then what transformations have to be applied on those data sources, on these data sets? How to join data sets together? How to detect changes between them, right? And a lot more. Don't worry, we'll cover all of this stuff during this course. Now, if we think about the exam and the skills that are required to pass it, the best source of information is Microsoft site. So if we type DP203 into a browser, then the first link we have is a link from Microsoft Learn, right? So that's the one that we want to check. And here we can see this DP203 study guide. That's our link. And on this site, you will have a very detailed information about the skills that you should have, right? So you will have the audience profile and then detailed information about requirements. And those requirements are split into different sections, like design and implement the data storage, which has something about partition strategy, data exploration layer. Then we've got data processing, ingesting and transforming data, batch processing, something about streaming, and so on, right? So make sure that you review this list. However, what I don't like about this list is that it doesn't really correspond to a natural life cycle of our data. And my course will be organized in a different way than this table to make it easier for you to learn. So let me show it how it looks like. So let me just turn on my drawing machine and then we'll proceed. And one question you might have is Microsoft Fabric included in the exam? This new shiny BI tool from Microsoft. And the answer is no, not yet, right? For sure it will be added in the future, but it hasn't happened yet. And when it happens, then I will just update this course or add some separate videos about Microsoft Fabric. All right, so let's jump into whiteboard and let me draw something I call basic BI flow. And this basic BI flow, it is quite common in many BI solutions, right? And I know that every BI solution is different, but there are some common steps that usually we have to implement. And now, when we talk about BI solutions, first we've got to split them into two areas, right? So we've got batch solutions and streaming ones. Streaming. And right now I will focus on batch ones. We'll get back to streaming later on. So what are batch solutions? What is batch processing? So basically it means that we are processing data in batches, right? Let's say once a day, usually during the night. And in this nightly processing, we just grab all the data that was generated during the day. We process it, generate the reports. So when employees come to work the next day, they will have data prepared, right? And then depending on our requirements, we might either process it once a day, twice, or maybe more often. For example, if you've got employees from different time zones, we might process the data in a batch way twice a day. Streaming, on the other way, is completely different because here we've got a constant flow of events, right? And we've got to process them as they are delivered. For example, we might have some heartbeat sensors in hospitals or some IoT devices in factories that measure air temperature, right? For example. But that's a different type of scenarios. And we'll get back to streaming later on. So, the batching solutions. And let me draw this basic BI flow that I was talking about earlier. So basically, when we start processing our data, when we think about data solutions, we start with some data sources, right? And quite often there are just some files like CSV files, text files, Excel files, and so on. we might have some databases like SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, and so on. They might be located on premises in some data center, and in the cloud, like in Google, Amazon, or Azure. We might have some APIs to which we've got to connect, like Facebook API, Google Ads API, and so on, right? So let me call all of this stuff just data sources. Data sources. And this is simply input to our BI solutions. Then, on the other side of our solution, we've got reports, because that's what our end users would like to see. So we might have different line charts that show, I don't know, sales maybe, right? We might have some key performance indicators that show in a visual way if everything is fine. For example, this green arrow up that shows we are fine, right? We might have good old-fashioned tables that just show a lot of numbers, like detailed sales. We might have some pie charts that are just yet another way to display data in a visual way, right? So all of this stuff are simply reports, right? And then we've got users who would like to view those reports. And users. And now, basically, it is our task to fill the gap between data sources and reports, right? So, if we think about those common steps in data processing, it starts with data ingestion, with extracting the data, right? So let me call it ingest, or we can call it extract, right? We just want to grab the data from the source and store it somewhere. So if you want to store the data somewhere, it means that we need some data storage layer that should be flexible enough to be able to store different types of data, like files, data from databases, from APIs, and so on. Then, as I presented on this real-life example, data that we get from the source very often requires some transformations, right? So that's yet another stage that usually we have to do. So we've got to transform our data. Transform, right? And transformed data has to be saved again somewhere. It might be the same storage layer that we used previously, or it might be something completely different. It depends. Then what we might need to do is to model our data and serve it to our reports, right? Like this. And now, what parts of this whole process are data engineer responsibilities? So basically, it is like this. So everything between data sources and modeling and serving is a responsibility of a data engineer. Data engineer. All right. The remaining part, which mainly consists of reports creation, is a task of a data analyst. So that's a data analyst. And Microsoft has a separate certification and separate exam for data analysts, right? Here we are covering data engineering path. Now, in real life, it will be quite often to have some overlap between data engineer and data analyst, right? So data engineer might be involved in creating reports, and data analyst might be involved in transforming the data. But anyway, in this course, we will focus on those early stages like ingesting the data, transforming it, and so on. And when it comes to data structure or to the course structure, we will follow this natural life cycle of data, right? Starting from ingesting it from the source, through transforming it, and so on, right? So it will go like this, course. That's our course. And basically, that's it. One more thing about the exam. If you would like to get more information or more lessons about this exam, then there is this great way to learn in your own pace, those self-paced learning paths. I highly recommend to at least take a look at them, especially in areas that you feel that you need some improvement. Alright, so basically that's it. It was a lot of fun creating this video. I'm really excited to start working on it, and hopefully it will be a good series. So see you next time when we will talk about this cool service that we can use to store our data that we want to ingest from data sources. So that's it for today. Take care and see you soon.